Namaskar, dear viewers. I welcome you all for today's session on postgraduate certificate in climate change. The program Postgraduate Certificate in Climate Change is offered by School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies. We all know that climate change is challenging our existence. It is impacting our livelihood, it is impacting every ecosystem possible, whether it is a primary sector or the secondary sector, even our health, urban infrastructure, energy sector. So everything it is impacting. Looking at the gravity of the situation, looking at the importance of climate change adaptation, in our country, the various ministries under the government of India, they were willing, or in other words, they were taking steps to sensitize the people regarding climate change and science. In this backdrop, IGNOU, School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, developed a tailor made program, that is, postgraduate certificate in climate change. This particular program has been, as I said, it has been tailor-made to the need to meet the demand of the learners. This has been this has, I mean, in fact, when you look at the structure, it is incorporating many aspects of climate change, including the science of climate change, impacts of climate change, and also the mitigation and adaptation strategies. This particular program, it targets the school teachers, the college level teachers, even the professionals, environmental executives working in non-governmental organizations, and also if you look at it in the field of environmental journalism, also this particular program will be very useful. And when you look at the objectives of this particular program, as I said that the basic objective is to expose the learners to the domain of climate change, the science of climate change, what exactly is happening to the environment from the perspective of climate change. The second important objective is to equip the learners regarding the impacts of climate change on the terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. The third important objective of this particular program is to equip the learners with the strategies, mitigation and adaptation strategies to climate change. The fourth objective for this program is that to capacitate the learners with the tools, climate assessment tools. The fourth important objective of this particular program is to expose the learners again to the interaction that is taking place between climate change and society. So these are all the five important objectives for this particular program. To meet these objectives, five important objectives, the program has been divided into five important courses, and three are compulsory courses, two are optional courses. When I say compulsory courses, I mean the learners must complete those three compulsory courses, like Introduction to Climate Change, Impacts of Climate Change. The third one is Mitigation and Adaptation to Climate Change. As regards the optional courses, the learners can choose either climate assessment tools or climate change and society. So these are all the five important courses for this particular program. As far as the other criteria is concerned, when any graduate can take admission for this particular program, and when you look at the time duration, it is basically 6 months duration. The minimum duration is 6 months. The maximum is 2 years. And as far as the fees is concerned, it is 3,800 rupees. And now the admission is open, and I welcome you all for enrolling in this particular program. And now I just wanted to explain to you what exactly the contents are there, so that the learners will be knowing much better about the program, and you can understand yourself that it meets the needs of the present generation. Okay. Now, as I said, that to address those program objectives, we have five courses. The first and foremost important course is Introduction to Climate Change. So when you talk about Introduction to Climate Change, it has been divided into four blocks. In the first block, it talks about the atmosphere, the climate system, the feedbacks, the solar budgeting, and also the drivers of climate change. So for a student to understand about climate change, they must understand how the components of climate system is interacting with each other, once they understand the interaction between whether it's an atmosphere or hydrosphere or cryosphere or a biosphere, so there is a lot of interaction that is taking place within the components of the climate system. When you talk about the interaction, you must understand that the driving force for the interaction to take place is the solar radiation. So we get all the energy, almost 99% of our energy, whatever we are receiving on the Earth's surface, is from the sun's energy, solar radiation. So this solar energy, how it is being utilized, what kind of interaction it is having, with the atmospheric components, with the terrestrial components, so that all will form the heat budget. Understand, so that heat budget, energy budget, in other words, that's essentially important, and that has been covered in this particular block. Second is, as I talked about the interaction between the components of climate system, along with the interaction there is kind of a feedback mechanism, is it. It can be either a positive one or a negative one. So for example, if there is an increase in surface air temperature, what kind of impact it can have on the cryosphere? So you'll be observing glacier melting, and because of glacier melting there can be increase in the sea level rise. And also, if you see, the direct impact will be, for example, increase in surface air temperature can increase the sea level. How? By thermal expansion of water. So there is a kind of feedback is there, and this all will be covered in this particular block. Okay. And as far as climate change science is concerned, whatever we are talking about at the present day, it is modern climate change. And this, when you look at the footprint of human beings with respect to the climate change, we are responsible for causing climate change. That is the reason why the present day climate change is called as anthropogenically induced climate change. So, but when you look back on the geological past, there can be many other reasons, and those reasons, those causes can be called as natural causes. They are called as natural drivers. Even the movement of tectonic plates, volcanic eruption, even the orbital, whether it's Earth rotating around the sun, revolution. So everything this is called as orbital, oscillations. This is called technically it is called as Milankovitch oscillations. So these Milankovitch oscillations, even the output of solar radiation, what we get from the sun, that's called solar output. So solar output and tectonic plate movements, also volcanic eruption, so these all can cause change to the climatic condition, and this is called as natural cause of climate change. On the other hand, if you see, the human impact, in fact it started since the industrial revolution. Why? Because since the industrial revolution we started to use more of fossil fuels, and because of using more of fossil fuels, definitely when fossil fuel combustion has led to more of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and this has started a kind of cascading effect, and that led to the present day the condition. It's called climate change. So this is called as anthropogenically induced climate change. So in this first block we'll be covering about the science of climate change, that includes the natural and human drivers of climate change. Okay. The second block of the introduction to climate change, you can see for yourself that in the second block of introduction to climate change, you can see for yourself, we'll be talking about the past climatic condition, because we need to understand about the past climate, because once we understand the past climatic condition, we will be in a position to attribute the causes of climate change. Because in the past, when there was no human imprint was not there, footprint was not there, because human action was very very less, and it's since 10,000 years it only the human effect was there. But before that, what has happened? So many causes have happened in the geological past. And what was the reason? So those reasons, if you were in a position to understand, then we will be in a position to attribute the present day changes to human beings. Understood? Because when you talk about, for example, the carbon dioxide concentration, now it is around 420 parts per million. But in the geological past, there was a period, during the Precambrian period, the concentration of carbon dioxide was 20 times from the present level. 20 times, it's a huge amount. But then no human beings were there. But how? What all the things have happened? Understood? So during that particular period, maybe some other phenomenon was playing an important role. So by understanding the geological past from the climate perspective, so we can better understand the changes, better understand the causes of climate change. So this the past climate is been included in the second block. Next, when you talk about the past climate, how to decipher it? How can we understand? Because the instrumental records, if you look at it, it has been since last 100 years we have instrumental records. But 10,000 years or 1 million years back, how can we decipher the past climatic conditions? So for that, we use certain records, certain data. So those records, if it is in the geological scale, we call it as geological data, archaeological data. Even in the last 10,000 years, if you see, human beings also maintain certain diaries. The farmers, the travelers, historians, they would have maintained certain diary, and in that diary, they would have noted the climatic condition in many parts of the world. So that particular diary also can be a wonderful resource for us to understand the past climatic condition. So the second block deals with the data point also, geological data, anthropological data also. Next is that, yeah, we have understood the past climatic condition and we know the data points also, and what will happen to the future climate, because we need to understand the future climatic condition. To understand the future climatic condition, to predict it, we need to have certain analysis. It's called scenario analysis. We'll be using certain emission pathways. For example, we are using in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we are using RCP data. RCP means representative concentration pathway. Okay, that all depends on the population, the demographic attributes, what will be the population projection, what kind of economic development pathway will be there, energy use pathways will be there, socioeconomic conditions, everything has been pooled, and based on that thing, an analysis will be done. Okay, so this also has been included in the second block. In the third block, because we need to understand that climate is changing and how can we feel it. Understood? So how we can say whether it's a change in the precipitation or a change in the temperature, even the occurrence of extreme events, is all kind of a symptom of climate change. We can visualize ourselves that yes, climate is changing. Through what? Through the changing pattern of intensity or amount of precipitation, the occurrence, the frequency, that also matters actually. So these all have been covered in the third block. The fourth block of the course, you can see that we have discussed about we have incorporated indeed about the climate policy. When I say climate policy, the conventions, the negotiations, the protocols, even the law on climate change, and what kind of measures the Indian government has taken at the nation level, at the local and regional level also. So everything has been incorporated in the last block. It's all the climate conventions. Okay, if we look at the conventions, United Nations have taken a lot of steps, whether it's an Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Every 4 years it is giving its assessment report. Under the UN umbrella, many developments have taken place. The key development is the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, and the recent past in 2015, Paris Agreement came into existence. And along with the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals also equally important. SDG 13 is equally important. So everything has been covered in this last block. Now, in the first course, I just talked about that the learners will be knowing everything about the science of climate change indeed. Okay, so you'll be understanding every aspect of climate change. So having covered that science of climate change, when you go to the next course, that is impacts of climate change. In this impacts of climate change, it has been covered into 4 blocks, divided into 4 blocks. The first block deals with the primary sector. When I say primary sector, what kind of impact the climate change can cause on agriculture sector, agriculture production system, and related thing is the animal husbandry, fisheries, and what kind of impact it can be there. Because for any country, particularly for a developing country, agriculture sector is the most important thing because that runs the economy. Understood? Because whatever we are doing it, we tried, because this agriculture is having a forward and backward linkages with the secondary and tertiary sector also. So that is why this agriculture, the impacts, that has been included as the first unit in the first block. So every aspect of it, why there is a reduction in the agriculture production, what is the cause of it, how climate change, or in other words, increase in surface air temperature, what kind of impact it can have on agriculture, increase in carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, what kind of impact it can have on the croplands. So that has been covered in this block. as I said, animal husbandry also. When you talk about animal husbandry, because definitely, the feeding, the feed pattern, the kind of rationing, or in other words, the feed intake by the animals, that will be influenced by the air temperature, and also the milk production, the whether it is, everything will be interlinked. So that is a key component that we need to take into account, because if we are already a tropical country, and as far as the milk production and the population of the cattle and the buffalo is concerned, we are playing a very important role at the global level. So this unit is again equally important thing. And the next one is the fisheries sector, because this climate change can affect every ecosystem, in particularly this aquatic ecosystem, like your fisheries, the production can be greatly influenced. Okay, that is covered in the first block. As far as the second block is concerned, in the second block, the natural ecosystem, like soil, ocean ecosystem, the mountain and hill ecosystems. So this has been covered in the second block. So it's a very important thing when you talk about a soil, because that forms the bedrock of your all agricultural activity. So how soil, in what way soil fertility or soil productivity will be influenced by the climate change, that has been covered in this second block. And when you talk about a mountain ecosystem, it's a fragile ecosystem, and this fragile ecosystem is vulnerable to the changing climatic conditions. So when the climatic condition is still is it's changing, whether it's in extreme events, weather events, so the vulnerability will be still increasing. So that unit, on mountain ecosystem will be sufficient for you to understand. And the third block on this, in the impacts of climate change is concerned, it talks about how climate change can affect the resources, you know energy resources, what kind of effect it can have on the renewable energy sector, what kind of effect the climate change can have on the infrastructure or an urban environment, because a lot of infrastructure is, urban infrastructure is also will be equally impacted by climate change. And also in the last block, it talks about the livelihood aspect, because the climate change, whether it's a mountain hill ecosystem or an agriculture system, the livelihood of the people will be impacted by climate change. So livelihood security and other things also is equally important. That has been covered in the last block, livelihood security, and also the human health aspect. When you talk about human health, because of this climate change, there can be more prevalence of vector-borne diseases like malaria, dengue, chikungunya, many are there. So that impact will be much higher in the coming days or coming decade. Why? Because the vulnerability has to be taken into account. Already the human, when you look at the immunity level, so that has been impacted by the climate change, and along with that thing, your public, whether it's in what you call that health infrastructure, that has been impacted by climate change, and also your food security is challenged by climate change. So every way, if you look at it, the vulnerability of the people, that has to be taken into account, and that is very nicely, it has been covered in this last block. So now we have talked about the impacts of climate change. Next course is mitigation and adaptation to climate change, because we have read about the science, and in fact we have discussed about the science and impacts. We need to understand about the mitigation also, how best we can control it. So when you talk about this particular course, third course, mitigation and adaptation to climate change, we need to understand the concept of mitigation. And well, mitigation alone will not be sufficient to manage climate change, so we need to understand other concepts also, like adaptation. So the bedrock of these both component, mitigation and adaptation, is climate resilience. How, in what way our measures, our activities, our programs can help to increase the climate resilience. So whether it's a public health infrastructure or whatever infrastructure, or even urban ecosystem, whatever we are talking about it, we are trying to bring in the component of climate resilience. We need to increase the resilience capacity. In other words, we need to increase the adaptive capacity also, because that is the key component, the way forward indeed. So in this mitigation and adaptation to climate change, we have talked about the basic concept of mitigation and adaptation. Thereafter, sector specific, like your agriculture sector, what kind of mitigation aspect can be taken, or what kind of adaptation can be taken into account, like your climate smart agriculture is in agriculture. And I just talked about the climate resilient public health infrastructure. That is also key important thing. And as far as the building sector is concerned, we can think about a green building. Green building is a wonderful concept concept because it is bringing in all the possible positivity. When I say positivity, as far as the energy use is concerned, as far as the environmental impact is concerned, it is minimizing all the possible things. So that way, green building is very important. It has been included also in this course. And when you talk about the transportation sector, yes, green transportation is a need of the hour. Wherein so from petrol or diesel, you can think about a CNG. Or in the current era, if you look at it, there's a lot of what you call support or incentives for the electrical vehicles. So these all, I think, it's a new development that is taking place, that has been covered in this course, third course. So these three are the compulsory courses. Now let us talk about the optional courses. When you talk about optional courses, there are two courses. One is climate change assessment tools. The other one is climate change and society. When you talk about climate change assessment tools, the basic thing is that we need to understand the vulnerability concept. Why the people are vulnerable. So for that, there is vulnerability assessment that has been included in the first block. When you talk about vulnerability assessment, for, for a beginner, you can understand that what is making them, what are the factors that make the people or ecosystem vulnerable. It can be exposure to the risk. It can be certain adaptive capacity that has been decreased, or the people are more vulnerable because of the social economic conditions also. Even physical vulnerability is also there. So there are a lot of approaches there. So that all has been covered in the first block. Okay, as far as climate change assessment tool is concerned. And thereafter, one models are there, crop models are there. It has been included here. In this crop model, you can understand that, okay, if there is an increase in the air temperature, what kind of impact it can have on agriculture production. If there is an increase in the carbon dioxide concentration, what kind of impact it can have on every aspect of agriculture, whether it's a flowering stage or a reproductive stage, what kind of impact it can have, what kind of influence on the farmers. When I say influence, because the demand for water will be much higher, and in that case they need to think about certain strategies, climate smart strategies, or in other words, resilient strategies. When I say resilient strategies, the kind of crops they grow, the kind of varieties they'll be adopting, that has to be changed, to suit the or to meet the demand of the day. So this has been covered in the climate assessment tools. And of course, there is one more important tool, like spatial tools also. Geospatial tools also can be used for understanding or assessing the climate change. So this has been included in the climate change assessment tools. Last course is climate change and society. So in this course, if you see, it is like basically talks about the interaction between climate change and society. What kind of interaction? Again, I just talked about the vulnerability that has been included, because when you look at the vulnerability, certain section of people, whether it is the children or old people or the women, they are more vulnerable due to many reasons. Okay, whether it can be a socio-economic condition, it can be their accessibility to resources or decision-making power or a technology or financial resources also. So there are many factors that is influencing their vulnerability, that group of people. And so if you look at the vulnerability, so it's varying at the individual level, at the society level, even at the country level. Certain developing countries are more vulnerable. There are certain group of countries, developed countries, they are not vulnerable. In fact, they are taking steps to manage, even under the extreme conditions also. They are planning to how to manage well, because their development has reached that level. I mean, almost, because they are, whatever the energy use is concerned, they have done it, everything. So in that way, what happened, their strategy is much different from the developing country. On the other hand, if you look at a small island developing countries, their strategy will be totally different. When I say strategy, because their existence is questioned. When I talk about a Pacific island people or the Mauritius or Maldives, think about those people, how they will be looking at the climate change. So their thing is that their existence is questioned. When their existence is challenged, so their approach, everything will be different. So what kind of interaction so climate change can have on these people, society? Okay, so that is how it is important. At the same time, if you look at it, there are a group of people, traditional dwellers, indigenous knowledge also. So the indigenous knowledge also can be equally helpful for adapting. When I say adapting, because definitely because adaptation is the most important thing. Okay, so that has been included in this climate change and society. And another thing is that when you look at the this climate change, it affects, as I said, it's affecting every ecosystem. It is also affecting our the what do you call that, human rights also. Because there is possibility, because of increase in surface temperature, there can be a possibility of displacement, climate induced displacement or refugees is possible, and that can also can cause a lot of harm to the people, whether it is in the terms of the resources, food resources, or the shelter, everything will be impacted deeply. So climate change can influence the human rights also. So what kind of steps that has to be taken? So when you talk about the steps, because as I said that at the global level there are many steps have been taken, but at the national level also many steps have been taken, and in India also, if you look at it, at the national level we have a national action plan on climate change, and many things we are doing it at the national level. At the sub-region level or at the state level or local level also we are doing it. That has been included in this last course, climate change and society. So I've just covered all the the possible contours of the course, the program, postgraduate certificate in climate change. It is, in fact, it's a comprehensive program. Every aspect of climate change has been covered. So through this session, I welcome you all for joining this particular program. Thank you very much.
We wear clothes on a daily basis. But have we ever wondered, where do our clothes come from? Who makes our clothing? And who are the people and the process responsible for the whole manufacture?